The 19th century was an age of machines and revolutions, the factory smoke rising alongside the ideas of liberty and reform. Amid this tension stood John Stuart Mill, child prodigy, philosopher, and economist. Educated by his father James Mill and mentored by Jeremy Bentham, Mill was raised within the strict logic of utilitarianism, the belief that the moral worth of any action lies in its capacity to produce happiness for the greatest number. But Mill's life would become a long negotiation between logic and empathy. He saw that economics, while powerful, was dangerously immoral if detached from human well-being. As factories multiplied and wages fell, Mill realized that progress measured by output alone could hollow out the soul of society. Through his works, Principles of Political Economy, 1848, and On Liberty, 1859, he reimagined classical economics not as an engine of production, but as a moral system, where liberty, justice, and education were as vital as capital and labor. Mill's most lasting contribution was his defense of liberty, not merely as political freedom, but as the foundation of moral and intellectual growth. He argued that individuality is not an indulgence, but a necessity for progress. In On Liberty, Mill defined a single guiding principle: the freedom of each person should extend until it harms another. This harm principle became one of the cornerstones of modern liberal thought. For Mill, freedom was not only a political ideal but an economic one. He warned that unchecked majority opinion could be as oppressive as monarchs. In a world of accelerating mechanization, conformity could strangle creativity and innovation, the very engines of prosperity. Thus, Mill fused economics with psychology. He believed that free minds, like free markets, generate diversity, resilience, and progress. But liberty, he insisted, required education, not chaos. True freedom was an art cultivated by intellect and virtue. Utilitarianism taught that the good of society could be measured by its total happiness. But Mill refined the doctrine. He distinguished between higher and lower pleasures, the happiness of intellect and moral sentiment versus the mere gratification of appetite. For him, a society that valued comfort over character was not progressing, but decaying. This distinction reframed economics as a moral instrument. Wealth and growth mattered only insofar as they improved human well-being. In Mill's framework, policies and production were to be judged not by profit, but by their capacity to elevate thought and justice. He saw economics as a transitional science, one that would eventually evolve into a social art. Once the necessities of life were secured, Mill imagined humanity turning its energies toward creativity, cooperation, and philosophy. It was a vision of post-scarcity ethics, centuries ahead of its time. Mill's Principles of Political Economy introduced one of the most forward-thinking ideas in classical economics: the stationary state. He foresaw that the constant chase for expansion would one day reach its natural limit. But unlike Malthus, who saw limits as tragedy, Mill saw them as opportunity. He believed that once material needs were met, progress could continue through moral and intellectual refinement, rather than endless consumption. In this, Mill anticipated ecological economics by nearly a century. He imagined a world of sufficiency, where technology stabilized population and production, and society focused on equality, education, and happiness. The stationary state was not stagnation, but balance, a form of equilibrium between human ambition and planetary capacity. Mill thus became the bridge between classical growth theory and sustainable thought, the first economist to envision prosperity without expansion. Mill's influence extends far beyond economics. His works shaped feminism, education reform, social justice, and modern democracy. He argued passionately for women's suffrage and equal opportunity, insisting that no society could be just while half its citizens were constrained. In economics, his humanistic approach softened the cold mechanics of the market. He reminded future generations that progress without virtue is hollow, and liberty without empathy is fragile. Mill's ideas formed the ethical skeleton of modern liberal economies, those that seek both freedom and fairness. His synthesis of philosophy and economics remains the most enduring, that the good life is not measured by how much we consume, but by how freely and wisely we live. For Mill, liberty was not the opposite of order. It was order perfected by reason.